Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Cloud and Clear. I am John Campbell. I'm the Vice President of the Customer Experience here at SADA, and I am really excited to introduce you today to Paul Staelin. He is the Vice President of Customer Success and Services at Trifacta by Alteryx. And we're going to talk a little bit about Trifacta. We're going to talk a little bit about Google Cloud. We'll probably throw in a little bit of customer success stuff up there since it's both near and dear to both of our hearts as we go around. So, well, thank you, Paul, for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your input and feedback as we go through this episode of Cloud and Clear.
Well, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell me a little bit about your journey. What got you to where you are now?
Started in the software space in product management and doing far more on the technical side. As I started engaging more with customers, I realized the part that made me happy in my job was helping people actually get value from that software. And so I migrated closer and closer to the customer, and then ultimately a little bit of that product bent of trying to build and design a customer experience like a product was kind of the happy end point for me. So designing customer journeys, making sure that we're delivering the right experiences, customers are getting value. Those are the things that kind of pulled me into the role that I have today.
That's great. Very similar journey to myself as well. My previous roles have been in product management, and now in an operations role, doing customer success, making sure customers are happy. It's and doing what you're doing as well is like how do we productize the experience the customer has? It's not. I think it's sometimes in software companies and companies like SADA, when you think of product, you think of a thing like Gmail or BigQuery or something like that. But what the customer experiences from a support side and how they experience your company, from the people that they interact with, is just as important from a product perspective as well. So that's awesome. Love to hear it. So tell me a little bit about Trifacta and what you do for customers. What gaps are you filling? Where's the value that you provide?
Yeah, well, broadly speaking, the space that we really help people fill is what would be called kind of the data preparation space. Obviously, there is more data than anyone can analyze right now in the cloud successfully, but taking that data in its raw form and turning it into something that's ready for analysis is something that we've really helped people do. And as we've moved into the space that we particularly claim as kind of our own is the data engineering cloud, which is we help people really kind of do that data engineering in the cloud to get it ready for analysis.
That's awesome. And to your point, there is no shortage of data out there, and there's of course a lot of companies working with customers to help them along with it. How does Trifacta, how does it differentiate from others in the industry? What's your claim to fame, if you will, that you're doing for folks?
Yeah, I think there are kind of two primary things that we really think separate us from the crowd. One, we view ourselves as an open platform. We actually can work, across multiple clouds. We can work, in multiple kind of data infrastructures, and allow that kind of open engagement, as well as tying to some of your internal infrastructure and APIs and other things, really making that a seamless platform. And we are highly interactive. So not necessarily a set of coding tools. We actually have a kind of point and click interface where people can build pretty complex data transformations, build them in a repeatable, scalable, shareable, and collaborative way, so that you can really data prep is a team sport, and not everyone's an expert in every piece of data. Having those people work together in an interactive way and with each other is where we really kind of separate from most of the other tools that can help you do pieces and parts of this value chain. We think we uniquely do all of it.
Yeah, that's cool. From my product days, what I would always ask myself, and now even in customer success and stuff, was where in the system that the customers are using, where's the complexity that's hard for people to solve. And I think there are so many spots in the data chain that are complex for customers to get in there and understand what they're doing. So getting good companies like yours to come in there and solve those things is key for a lot of people to be successful. When it comes to Google Cloud, how does Trifacta work with Google Cloud? How does the technology integrate, and what are you using Google Cloud for?
Yeah, so we've got kind of two primary paradigms that people are using Trifacta for within the Google Data Prep to get their data ready for analysis. Fundamentally, we have a lot of people who are taking files and kind of piping them in and transforming them into BigQuery. It's probably the most common use case. We have other folks who are using other kind of data movement tools to bring the data into BigQuery, and they're using us to really provide the platform for the broader company to then turn the raw files that have been shipped into BigQuery and turn it into data that's ready for analysis. So BigQuery to BigQuery. So those are kind of the two primary paradigms. In general, when we're pulled in, there are multiple people doing this. There is a fair amount of interdependency and collaboration required, and there's varying skill sets, right? Not only data engineers do data engineering now. So doing this in a manner where you can handle people with data analyst skill sets all the way to data engineering skill sets and have them actually work together meaningfully, collaboratively, and productively is what we do uniquely well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just going on the customer success side of it and support side of it, how do you, from a human standpoint, how do you help bring those areas together? What is the role that your team plays in those conversations?
Generally, and when we bring a new customer into the fold, we do have kind of an engagement model where folks from our organization and our partner organizations will come together, help the organization tackle and solve a use case somewhere in the firm. We're generally engaging with folks in kind of the data team and then potentially distributed throughout the business and kind of teaching them how to fish, right? Our primary MO is to come in, have people enroll in our training. It's all online. Pretty much you can do what you want. But working with us, having attended an online driver's ed course, I wouldn't necessarily want to sit in the car with my son the first time. I'd like to have a joint steering wheel and have some of the best practices in that and go through the use case, see what it's really like to go from start to finish on a use case, using the best practices, scalable, repeatable methods and approaches, and then roll to the next use case and team, and next use case and team, and next use case and team. And we try to facilitate that kind of conversation and deployment, predominantly through our customer success managers who kind of engage. They don't do hands-on keyboards, but we do try to bring technical resources to bear when necessary, or those of our partners, to make sure that customer, as they're going through this, it really is a learning by doing type experience.
Well, that's great. And I think you could back me up on this as well, but like being able to find those human interaction points becomes so critical, especially in the first 3 to 6 months of a customer's life cycle. And to do it successfully really sets them up for, long-term use of your product. And we see that for customers on Google Cloud as well. Yeah, let's jump in a little bit more about Google Cloud. What when you look at the technology, you look at how Google is working with you, how and the technology of the Google Cloud platform, how has it helped Trifacta innovate, and has it changed the way that you do business in some ways?
There's a lot of things as we've gone from, we started life, most of the work that we were doing was predominantly tied to data lakes, which, 8 years ago were on-prem in Hadoop, right? As people have moved to cloud data lakes, cloud data warehouses, and cloud lake houses, as they're now affectionately known, being able to do this in kind of a broader platform. We do have now the ability for people to spin up infrastructure very quickly, very easily. We're seeing much, much smaller companies be able to actually engage with us with much smaller teams very successfully for much less investment. And it's really dramatically changing kind of the the landscape, the texture, the shape of the customers with whom we engage and who are able to actually achieve real value with our solutions. Everyone who's got data has a data problem, whether they know it or not, and helping them solve those problems so they can actually get the reporting, the insights, the ML, all the types of things that you want to be able to do that actually help you drive your business forward. And we help fill a critical step there. So we've seen a lot of digital natives appear, and again, it really has accelerated kind of our overall ability to address, tackle, and engage with a much broader swath of the marketplace.
Yeah, that's great. And to your point, everyone has a data problem. It's like working with customers for a very long time. Even the customers that you would think understand have it all together. There's not rarely do I ever hear, oh, our data's clean and good, very easy to work with. So that is absolutely the case.
I've never heard that in my career, frankly. I think it's a little bit like my kids, where when they're in 6th grade, they think those 9th graders have it all figured out, and by the time you get to 9th grade, you realize they don't have it figured out. Oh, those seniors must have it all figured out, but when you get there, you realize they don't have it figured out either. I'm terrified at some point my kids will realize that I'm basically playing jazz as an adult, trying to figure it all out as I go. But I think that's the ultimate maturity point for most organizations with data.
Yeah, that's great. I turned 40 in a few weeks, and I'm hoping at some point I do figure it out. But I'm not. After 40 years, I'm not entirely hopeful. So, why did you choose SADA? What makes SADA different? You're part of our SaaS Alliance program. I would love to just understand kind of how that evolved and our partnership and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, and we're super excited to be partners with SADA. There are a number of things that make you stand out kind of broadly in the marketplace, but also from a kind of a philosophical, cultural approach. At least in our exposure with you, you've been very customer focused, very success minded, and that kind of mindset on helping drive success for customers, not just selling them something, is something that we really resonate with. I mean, we're in business to help people be better at their jobs, accomplish more, be more successful, get more value from the data they have, and really investing in that journey with the customers. So that kind of philosophical alignment, particularly given my role, is very important. Obviously, you guys have a sterling reputation and a very strong market presence and reputation as well, which obviously makes a good partnership. But we think more importantly, from my perspective, is the kind of cultural match.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I've worked in a few different organizations, and that what drives the organization is so intrinsic to how we operate with partners and customers. And I think, to your point, especially on my side, coming from a customer experience, and I know this goes all the way up to Tony, our CEO. The customer really drives what we do. And man, when we find another organization where it's similar, it's so easy to meld together and work and do amazing things together. So, which is fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about the last 2 years have been interesting with the pandemic and changes. You're really close to your customers in the customer success side. So I would love to know, in your space and what you're doing, like what the last 2 years have brought about from a change perspective for your customers that you work with, how you work as a company, and those types of things as well.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to say the 2 years has made sure that we have ironed out every possible electronic meeting bug possible. But as the start of our conversation today proved, that is not yet true. Maybe another 2 years to do it. In terms of the way that we work with people, one of the things that I think has surprised me and many others really is how effective working remote can be. I grew up in a culture of you're in the office 5 days a week. You're in there at least from 9 to 5, probably 8 to 6 every day. And there's a lot of value in those informal meetings that happen, literally while you're having lunch at the kitchen or going to get a cup of coffee, and you can solve a lot of little problems on the edges far more effectively than you can remotely, where I have to actually book time with you to discuss a topic. It's not going to accidentally happen during the course of the day. But our customers have also gotten pretty accustomed to working remotely. So we have far more, obviously remote sessions. I haven't been on a customer site in my job, which is almost unfathomable to me, in over a year and a half. And yet I'm still meeting with them. I still feel like we've got personal connection. We're still able to talk about real business problems and solve them. It's been a dramatic paradigm shift. So that has changed. And the fact that we're still driving and engineering specific touch points along a customer journey to make sure we're holding their hand and guiding them to a successful outcome, that hasn't. So it's just been a frame set change, particularly as me, one of the old guys now, that the new working model really does work. And having poo-pooed it for a long time, I was wrong, which I'm happy to admit that this has actually worked out way better than I feared.
Yeah, it's in a way almost amazing how easy in a way it was just to drop into remote work and video conferencing for everything, and just making it work and business ticking on. But to your point, someday we'll figure out all of the AV stuff. It took us about 20 minutes to get everyone's cameras to work earlier. So, but we got there. We're here.
Mine specifically, yes.
And we're working. So, have you, when it comes to, on the data side and working with data engineers, one of the things that I wonder about and kind of this shift to work from home and now conversations about return to office is, is there anything from a segment or from a down to like a data team that impacts that? Are those data engineers, data architects, are they more likely to want to stay at home? Is there more of a hindrance there when they're not all together to whiteboard? What are you seeing on your customer side when it comes to that?
Yeah, most of the teams with whom we work are geographically widely dispersed, and I mean across continents, not just a city. So the kind of breadth and scope of the teams with whom we're engaging really are kind of broad, far, and having the mechanisms to kind of collaborate. And we do invest pretty heavily in collaboration in our platform. We do make it much like the Google platform. It's pretty easy to, you can send stuff to someone, they can look at it, you can see what they've written. It just makes it easy to have some of that asynchronous as well as the synchronous collaboration. And that has, I think that aspect of our capability set has become significantly more important in the last 2 years than it would have been before. And part of that is we've gone more into the cloud and we have more cloud natives. I think that's more true. And 8 years ago, we're dealing with kind of on-prem Hadoop data lakes. Most of these are big companies. Everyone's in the same office. It's not the same kind of diffuse team on a broad cloud platform. It's a different beast. But that collaboration piece has been, I think, a super powerful capability for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think for a lot of software companies and business software companies, the need for the last 2 years for that to be a primary function that they solve has become so important. And I think, moving forward, when people are evaluating, whereas that may not have been high atop the evaluation process, I think more so now than ever, it has to be in order for you to be successful, for the companies to be successful, software companies, but also the end customers as well. Not that you could have predicted anything in the last 2 years, but what do you have predictions for the next 2 years, or even 5 or 10 years when it comes to what we'll see on the technology side or data side or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think the broader trend of more and more organizations wanting to deploy more and more data productively, I think that is a long-lived trend. I don't think we're getting out of that. It's been true for the last 40 years. It'll be true for the next 40. And I'm pretty excited that we, as a society, are going to see a lot more people able to really participate in the information age. A lot more organizations benefit from it, and a lot more investment in the entire area. So I'm super excited. I am not going to predict specifically what will happen, but I feel pretty safe in predicting that this data is the new oil kind of theme will be true for the next 40 years easy. Certainly longer than I plan to work.
Yeah, I think absolutely the importance of data it's not going to change, and the proliferation of it is only going to make things like Trifacta even more important. Well, great. Well, Paul, that wraps up our conversation. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we mentioned that you'd like to get off your chest around data or work from home, return to office, or Trifacta itself?
No, I want to thank you for having me on today, and we are very, very excited about our partnership with SADA, and certainly look forward to helping our joint customers become really successful and get a lot of value out of their data as they look to progress their own businesses in the coming weeks, months, and years.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Paul, so much. And thank you, everyone, for watching or listening. Again, this is Cloud and Clear with SADA, and I'm John Campbell. We'll join you next time.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @CloudandClear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.